So Federal Chair Jerome Powell just released the Fed's rate decision. No change. And that's actually no surprise. The predictions going in was like 100% prediction by the markets that there's going to be no change. However, he did say a few things which I want to go over with you guys and also talk about the latest with the Trump and the freezing of the federal aid. So first, regarding the no change, there were many questions, not necessarily like, hey, why didn't you change anything? I think people kind of got that. Basically, we're in a time of uncertainty and it's a wait and see, right? Not necessarily in a hurry to raise rates, not necessarily in a hurry to cut rates, just keep it as it is. Now, what's odd about this particular news conference is I felt like Powell was saying a couple different things, like, you could argue talking both sides out of his mouth. At one point in the presser, he was like, hey, I think assets are overvalued. I thought that was an interesting thing. And then on top of that, though, he was also said like, hey, I think our rates are at a meaningful restrictive rate right now. So why do you put those two together, and why does it matter? So according to them, at least the way I heard it, it feels like they want to cut rates, but they're also acknowledging that assets are overvalued, because the idea would be if I cut rates, there's more money in the system, more borrowing, more leverage, and people maybe be playing the markets more, etc. If you wanted to bring asset values down, well, they're not really going to come down. This will say stabilize. You could theoretically raise rates, but this is where it gets into, are we at high interest rate levels or not? Historically, I would say no. So I would actually disagree with Federal Chair Jerome Powell, where he's saying, we think we're meaningfully restrictive. And if you don't understand what we're talking about, basically the idea is, hey, does the Fed trying to encourage, more spending, trying to get the economy going further? If you encourage that too much, though, then you risk of running inflation too hot. On the reverse, if you're sort of tightening, the monetary policy, et cetera, then you're making it harder to borrow money, harder to get money into the system, and prices should come down. So there's always a balance on that. You want, price stability and full employment. That's what they always say, right? So the problem is that, for a long time now, they've been saying, hey guys, we're trying to get inflation to the 2% rate. They're not there yet, and they may never get there, to be perfectly frank. It's hard to say because, like, they know the Trump policy is probably going to be inflationary, but he won't comment on that specifically, which gets into a lot of questions. Everyone's like, hey, what do you think about Trump tariffs? Hey, what do you think about Trump's immigration let's say problem, or I was going to say, policy, or hey, what do you think about Trump's DEI policies, these kind of things. Pretty much this press conference, for anything regarding Trump, Federal Chair Jerome Powell would be doing the Matrix, like, dodging bullets this way and dodging bullets that way. So and then he literally said many times, yeah, I understand your question, but I'm not going to comment. Like that was the basic gist of it. So he tried to remain neutral when it comes to political stuff, but they acknowledge it there, and everyone knows it's there. It's the elephant in the room. Because the problem is for the Fed, which I completely understand. Let's say Trump raises tariffs on whatever countries, on whatever goods. That's going to raise prices for consumers, okay? And the Fed, you could probably make forecasts and models based on just Trump's tariffs. However, you don't know how or when or if other countries are going to retaliate, and by how much. Other countries have said, if you do tariffs Trump, we will retaliate. So I think it's kind of a given, but you don't know how long a trade war would go on, because if, say, for example, Trump puts a 25% tariff on Canada, and Canada responds back, well, we're going to do 25% tariff on you, and I'll be like, oh, well, I see your 25% tariff, and I'll raise you 20. Yeah, so that would be essentially a trade war. So that's something that the Fed can't control. The thing that sort of disturbed me about this particular policy meeting was like crazy questions of like, and they asked me this before, hey, has President Trump, contacted you and said you have to, lower interest rates because that's what you got to do, etc. So according to Powell, I think he said, yeah, he said he has no comment on the president's policy, of course, but according to him, he hasn't been contacted by the president. Trump is always like, really staunch on like, I'm going to force them to cut rates, but according to Fed Chair Powell, he hasn't been contacted. They asked him about crypto, which I thought was an interesting one. So I know the Fed Chair Jerome Powell doesn't really like crypto that much. He's said it before in the past. This time around, the way he talked about it is like, well, I know that banks are getting into it. I know that they're offering these, crypto products to customers. And his point of view is, just as long as you're informing people about the risks. Um, it was it was an interesting change in his talk about that, because, and he can't talk about policy specifically, but it's sort of like a lot of his answers were, well, this is the policy of the Trump people, and we're part of the system, so we have to kind of go along with it. And that was similar with the DI stuff, because in the past they asked him, like, in the past you're very supportive of hiring diverse groups of people, right? And you think it's a good thing. How do you reconcile your previous statements and according to, say, what Trump is saying, we're like, hey, we're gonna effectively get rid of DEI. We don't know that's diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is always a contentious topic. How do you hire people? How do you pick people? And if you're on Trump's side of the fence, you think if you hire someone who's not a white dude, you just think that they're automatically unqualified. That's sort of that thinking on that. I disagree, of course. I'm obviously don't fit in that category of just being the white dude. And also want to make this clear: it doesn't mean that all white dudes are unqualified. It's not saying that at all. But I just want to make it really clear that lots of different people in the world are qualified, and I think we should look at everyone. And if you ever talk to reasonable people about this stuff, and reasonable people who have experience of working with different groups of people, that should be the goal, right? Just hire the best people regardless of your background, where you come from, etc. But unfortunately, there's some people who have preferences for hiring specific groups, and I'll let you guys be the judge of that one, because that's a contentious issue. And it happens for many different types of things where people have biases, etc. But I just wanted to reiterate the Federal Chair Jerome Powell. He would be more on the fence of, hey, we try to look at everyone and include more people. And the Trump people are trying to get rid of that and like not include everyone. So that'll be an interesting. But his answer was a dodge, but you could tell his feelings that were just like, well, we have to follow the law, or we have to follow the order. I think that's the word. I think the actual word he said was we have to follow the order, and that was a lot of like. They can't comment directly on the policy, but he also said to Federal Chair Jerome Powell, we can't comment directly on any Trump policy. They asked them about immigration issue of would that be inflationary or not. So that was an interesting one. So he actually acknowledged that if deport many workers, it'll be hard to fill some of the jobs that the undocumented workers or illegal immigrant, however you want to say it, work, be it construction, etc. So he can't get too much into the policy, but he did acknowledge that that's an issue. That's one of the questions that I perfectly frank, don't know the answer for sure, because that is a question out there. If, say, you deport, many undocumented workers that are part of the economy, be it they take care of your kids, cook your meals, work in the fields, agriculture, meatpacking plants, put roofs on your head, these kind of things. Will Americans replace those workers, right? Like, you do the jobs that we have, undocumented workers are doing now. Will Americans do those jobs? And that's the question. I've heard different things on that, but ultimately we'd have to see. But like I said, according to Federal Jerome Powell, he's saying those jobs he's been hearing are hard to fill, but that's anecdotally kind of thing. I think the really hard thing about this, and something he can't control directly, is the housing market. There wasn't really a lot of talk about housing in this particular meeting, because when you talk about prices and stuff like that, generally speaking, you don't necessarily want prices to all come crashing down on everything, because it has major ramifications. If you go into a disinflationary environment, meaning like things are coming down, like say in China, it ruptures the system to where like people are like, oh wow, crap. If I know things are coming down, I'm just going to wait a little bit longer for prices to come down even more, and then we all kind of get into this wait and see environment, and it kind of spirals in that direction. And then obviously there's the reverse. If we're all expecting, say, prices of things to go up, oh my God, we better buy it now before it goes up even more. And then that sort of creates a like, oh my God, everyone's buying, so we better keep buying. That's why they always talk about getting the system in balance, right? You don't necessarily want prices to be elevating too crazy, or you don't want prices to be coming down. You want price stability, right? The thing is, I think a lot of people they're like, hey, I want inflation to come down, I want prices to come down, but it's not really going to be like that. Well, I can't predict the future 100%, but if they get inflation under control, the idea would be price stabilize and only increase by 2% a year, right? Meaning that prices are still going to go up, just not as high. And then you run into the issue of everything's going to depend on your experience in your neck of the woods. Do you feel like you have enough money now? And right, did you get enough pay raises to keep up with inflation? Many workers have not received enough, pay increases to keep up inflation, and so it's tough. It's tough for them. To be honest, it's tough, and it's also tough out there. And I think the biggest one for everyone is the cost of housing. So I think that's probably the big elephant in the room that's hard to address. Now the Fed could lower the borrowing rate and try to get, theoretically encourage the housing market, but then you got to encourage home builders to actually build said housing, and then you're talking about where you're going to build said housing, which markets, what type of housing. Right now, the home builders are incentivized to build more of these sort of upper end houses. There's more profits in that kind of thing. In my particular opinion, and the Fed again can't really do these kind of policies. It's just not there in their wheelhouse. We should look at rezoning areas for more multifamily places. Try to build more affordable single family housing, and then also, in my opinion, get Wall Street investing and speculation out of the housing market. There's a lot discussed with the housing stuff because, like, for example, the work from home issue would be you have a lot of commercial buildings, basically office buildings in downtown areas that are not being used. And so we don't know exactly, like, are all the companies going to go back to, in the office 5 days a week, or are we going to continue doing work from home? Because essentially you don't want all this, buildings that are built there being unused, then just taking up space. Governments are losing tax dollars, that kind of thing. If we rezone those things to be residential, it's going to take a lot of investment to transform them into living spaces, but it could be done, and that could be helpful to providing more well, theoretically affordable housing. I say theoretically, it depends how you want to reduce that office spaces, because those particular parts of where commercial spaces are tend to be pretty hot areas because they're close to people's workspaces, like the central downtown. But we'll see. I was just mentioning, give me one example, so I'll repeat again. You could rezone some of the commercial zones. You could build more affordable housing, get Wall Street out, and try to get more starter homes on the market as well. At the issue right now, the last time I checked on, say, the housing situation, which is a big part of inflation, prices are still too high for most people, and also interest rates are a bit high. So you got those two things that are holding people back from buying homes. The other update I want to give you is on the Trump situation. So they originally did the pause on federal aid. The judge then blocked it. It just came out just a few minutes ago. I guess Trump's now rescinded his order. So I guess, hey, we take it back. We made a mistake. I'm an idiot. I didn't say I was an idiot, but I guess they're not going to try to push for that, because they had until Monday to try to cut aid to everything. In terms of the hiring situation, where they put out that email / memo to everyone, hey, if you or we're trying to encourage people to resign, I should say, and if you wish to resign, respond to the email by Monday with the subject heading, and just hit resign, hit reply. A lot of people in our comments were saying there's two things, and I want to mention it. So one would be, because I asked, are you talking with people at work about their decisions? What their thinking is. And actually, many people in the comments said there's a lot of MAGA fans with coworkers, and so it's kind of hard to talk with your coworkers about that kind of stuff. It's very contentious, of course. It's a MAGA fan would be worshiping Trump and then cheering on all these federal workers being pushed out. Other people mentioned in comments that the money may not necessarily be there for there. So, for example, the Trump people are saying, hey, we're going to do a buyout. Elon Musk was calling the buyout of 8 months of being very, very generous. But there was a really key issue on the table, which people mentioned, that would that F up your retirement, right? So let's say you take the buyout and then suddenly you can't, get your retirement benefits like you thought you would, or otherwise. So then it becomes a really bad deal. So I don't know the details of that kind of stuff. I can't speak to that, but I'll just say that was a major concern. And I think for me, if I were a federal worker and I had 12, 15 years on or whatever, into the system, that would be the number one thing that I'd be looking at. And the number one question I have is, like, okay, if you're forcing me out or buying me out, however you want to say it, does that affect my retirement benefits? I think one of the things that is very, very contentious, and just always keep it in mind, whenever someone promises you something that's, we'll say, I don't know, it's too good to be true. I don't think that's necessarily the right way to put it. Well, to say, whenever someone's offering you a large sum of money that may or may not come in the future, and you're not sure if the money's going to be there, be very cautious on that, because I don't know if the money would actually be there to pay out all the said people. And actually, it's interesting. The people also emailed me as well that they feel, and it depends on your situation. but they feel like they're understaffed in their particular agencies, so they don't necessarily see any bloat where they are. But again, that's going to depend where you are. Other people have been commenting, and been reading a lot of comments from you guys regarding the job situation, that some people saw the kind of the writing on the wall, and had already started looking for new positions outside of federal work. So there's that. And then other people had mentioned that they feel like, it's a denigration that Trump is saying, that, kind of calling, federal workers lazy or incompetent, this kind of stuff. And to just kind of feel like that's what should I say, negative thing to say. I mean, obviously not nice. Certainly there's, in any industry, be it, government work or, otherwise private work, there's gonna be people who, let's say aren't good workers, but to sort of do this blanket thing that they're doing is like, oh, we're gonna try to encourage as many people out as we can, and we hate, government workers. It's pretty reckless, to be perfectly frank, and especially when you're dealing with people's lives and people's jobs. Be careful on that stuff. And yes, if there's find someone you feel like is underperforming, I have no problem with, letting them go, or that kind of thing. I get that. But the idea that you're accusing everyone of, being a problem is that's the reckless part in it. So that's what's going on with the Fed and with Trump policy, these kind of things. I'd like to hear your thoughts. I just shared some of mine, and I'll catch you all in the next video.